Jason Fitz here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. And I know yesterday on First Take, Your Take, one of the questions they were throwing around, which we've been kind of laughing about as well, is some of the worst-run organizations. I guess this stems from the story that we were just talking about yesterday and then the last couple of minutes regarding Spike Lee and the Knicks. And, of course, the Knicks being, rivals of the Sixers and somewhat in our area. There's a time, for a 3-year span anyway, you could have put the Sixers in one of the worst-run organizations, it seemed like people would think. Although, were they being smart or were they being stupid? Who knows? But I'm always interested to see some of the reactions and the answers that Jason Fitz's listeners are giving him for the worst-run organizations in sports, because we've been having fun with the conversation, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Now, there's a lot of candidates out there, but I'm interested to see who was at the top of most people's list.
You know what? At the end, the Knicks get a ton of hate, and rightfully so. They brought it on themselves, but I think also the Browns and the Lions got a lot of hate too. So we got to remember these NFL teams. I think it is funny when you listen to Spike Lee talk, and he's like, "Oh, I haven't seen a championship, and I've been watching since the '70s." It's like, all right, what do you think? Most fans just buy season tickets and then watch championships? Like, I'm not sure what reality Spike thinks exists for most fans, but what Spike's talking about is what most fans deal with, where you support a team financially that lets you down every year. That's sort of what fandom is, Spike.
No doubt, yeah. And apparently he said he spent over, what'd you say, $30 million?
$30 million? I mean, the seats are $300,000 a season.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, but also I will challenge
I didn't
that,
renew
guys.
this year.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
Checks in the mail.
I get that the seats, are expensive. Are they more expensive for Spike than they are for the person sitting next to Spike that none of us have ever heard of? That was my takeaway. And look, the Knicks, believe me, they deserve their credit of discredit for the way they usually handle things. But, what I really hear out of that is Spike Lee wants to be able to use the employee entrance because he's Spike Lee and he spent all this money. But we have yet to hear about everybody else. The rest of the people sitting courtside, do they get to use the employee entrance too, or just Spike? Is his money supposed to get him more opportunity? Because I'll tell you, if I'm spending that $300,000 a year or whatever, and suddenly I don't get the same level of access that Spike does, I'd be angry.
And I would be angry as well, Fitz, but those people aren't Spike Lee, and that's not fair. But I think definitely better than me, and just with celebrities in general, they get special treatment. And I know Sixers,
Jack Nicholson's been getting it for years in L.A. I can't imagine this happening to him.
And I know it happens in Philly with Meek Mill and anyone else that's sitting courts, Allen Iverson, and the list goes on.
Oh, no, you're right. And being famous has its perks, right?
Yeah.
But there are also a lot of famous fans for the Knicks, right? So this is an organization that's used to people spending a lot of money and an organization that's used to a lot of famous fans. So, I don't know. That's the other untold part of this. When, pick your New York celebrity goes to those games, does Billy Joel walk through the employee entrance? I don't know. But I will tell you this, and this is the most humble brag. Yeah, he's people walking in. But I would say, as awful as this sounds, I've played the Garden, and I played the Garden for a sold-out show. And when I played the Garden for a sold-out show, I had to go through a very specific employee entrance, or a very specific artist entrance that you walk in when you're playing the show. So, I don't know what the benefit should be for Spike, but it just comes up. While the Knicks are bad for the way they communicate it, it still comes across to me like, a spoiled brat that's saying, I want the access I used to get.
All right, here's the question I have for you then, Fitz. If the Knicks keep coming up as answers for one of the worst, Jason Fitz, First Take, Your Take, ESPN Radio, our guest is always on a Wednesday. Do the Rangers also make the list? Because Dolan also owns the Rangers. It feels like he is not associated with the Rangers' ineptitude.
Yeah, that's because it's hockey, right? He should be associated with everything, but the fact is the Knicks are the Knicks partially because they're in the NBA. And look, I love hockey. I covered the Nashville Predators when I was in Nashville. I've been a lifelong hockey guy, but you can be terrible in hockey and about 8 people care, right? That's unfortunately just the way it goes for this year. The ineptitude could, why are we also not talking about the fact that his band stinks? But we don't, we focus on the Knicks.
We did just bring that up before you came on, the JD and what was it?
Straight Shot?
Straight Shots? The band
straight
needs
shot.
To give them straight shots that they're not good. Like, just tell them that and let it go.
Some other candidates. We had some listeners giving names for you to comment on as well. The Washington Wizards have to be in that mix. I can't remember the last time the Wizards won a playoff series. Literally can't remember the time that they won a playoff series.
Well, and they're also on the list because they are in an area that loves basketball. Like, I get it if you're in a non-traditional market, you're somewhere that maybe basketball isn't the thing, but like DC sports basketball is huge to that part of the country in that area. And, you know, I go back to my years in high school living outside of DC at one point, and, you know, you would sneak into College Park to try and go to a Maryland basketball game at that point. Like, there is a hotbed of people that want good basketball. So, yeah, I absolutely put the Wizards on that list. The Wizards and the Redskins both belong on that list to me.
Actually, Redskins was not brought up. We didn't bring that one up.
Now, we brought up the Browns, Fitz, and my argument for the Browns as the king of the heap is not because the Lions are bad and the Knicks are bad. All these teams have been bad for a long time. But I feel like in some of these teams, even the Wizards, you could say, hey, they had a star like Gilbert Arenas or John Wall. The Browns have had the double whammy of being awful and not having one single player that you would pay that money to want to see, even though you knew they were going to lose. I'm going to go see this great. Outside of 13 games of Josh Gordon one year where he was unbelievable, that's it. For 20 years, they've given you zilch.
Well, and that's its own level of just stink, you know. And the one thing I think we forget about with teams is that some people are just bad at hiring, and I'll say that about James Dolan. Like, James Dolan just every time he's tried to hire the right person, either he's gotten in the way or that person hasn't done the job well. But at some point, when you start to look at teams, and you guys know I'm a big Raiders fan, right? Like, there's just this era of Raiders football where you looked at it and said, all right, we are incapable as a team of hiring a good coach. And what do you do then? You know, and that's sort of a reminder when you talk about no stars, that's an organizational problem where it's like, man, the talent evaluators you're hiring, their job, and that's the most helpless feeling in all of sports.
Fitz, regarding the Knicks, we talked about this yesterday. I want your thoughts. How much does this affect the NBA? Like, do they need to step in and do something? And even just in general, when there's a horrible owner and a horrible organization, what's the answer if there is one?
I don't think there is, and I said this on the show today pretty passionately. I mean, to that point, who's the judge? Who's the jury? Who gets to decide when a team is bad? Who gets to decide how long is long enough? I mean, Hornets fans were all up in my mention saying that they're the worst for an organization in sports. So are we going to take them away from – I mean, are we going to take the Lions away from the Ford family? Like, you start to look up and down the line of teams. How long are you bad for before, you know, somebody steps in and intervenes? So I think that's a dangerous precedent to start. And to me, it's a little like going to your favorite restaurant and saying, you know what, I don't like the way this place is run. You are required to sell it. What's real is if you don't like the food and you don't like the service, stop eating the food. And the problem is we all as fans want somebody to save us from ourselves. We want to keep spending the money without consequence. And it just doesn't work that way. If you really want change for the Knicks, then he's got to stop making money, which means Knicks fans got to stop spending money. They're not going to do it, which means the cycle can continually repeats itself. But you ask the league to start stepping in. I think that's dangerous, personally.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We mentioned the Hornets, and we're like, so is not caring being a bad ownership group? Like the problem I feel is the Hornets, the area down there, like college trumps the pros. They don't get the scrutiny from the media. There's not like the same pressure as New York, Philadelphia, Boston, some of these other markets that the fans are just like, I don't care if they're good or bad. It's just like that's why I feel like the Hornets don't get the scrutiny.
So, and I think you're right about that. But let me challenge then, like, what about the Bengals? Like, the Bengals are
actually next on my list.
Yeah, but the Bengals have gone to the playoffs a bunch of times. So do we not care about a bunch of playoff appearances? Does that not matter at all?
See, I think the Bengals fans do care. It's just that the ownership doesn't, making them a bad ownership. I don't know that the Hornets fans care enough for the ownership to kind of react, if that makes sense.
I agree with that. And that's why when you get to that level, then you have to wonder about the future of the sport in that city, right? Like that becomes – because let's say you can say what you want about Philly sports, right? You can say what you want about the state of Philly sports, but you can never, ever question the passion of Philly sports fans, right? Like, that is the thing that drives that area. And you can't say that about the Hornets, and that's why eventually you'll start to look at it and say, okay, well, what's the Hornets' future then?
Yeah, great point. Jason Fitz, First Take, Your Take, ESPN Radio with us right now. All right, we debated it yesterday. You guys talked about it as well. LeBron James, by the way, what an unbelievable season he's having. And we were watching him last night because the Sixers played there, and they kept, really lamenting the fact that, hey, this guy's in his 17th year, the fact that he's playing at this level. But are you Team Giannis right now, or are you Team LeBron? Or is there an other that we're not thinking of?
No, I'm Team Giannis, but this one's tough because I understand and agree with the argument that we're just not appreciating enough of what LeBron is doing right now. So I say that, but then I'm like, yeah, but Giannis. I keep going back to this, though. Without Giannis, who are the Bucks? Not even just as a team. I mean, I don't know. They're not a good team. They've got Middleton that can play, but they don't have a team there without Giannis. But even who are the Bucks as a brand without Giannis? They're just completely irrelevant without him. And I keep going back to that as having some value to me in the MVP conversation, because right now the Bucks are the best team in the NBA. Now they play a softer schedule in the eyes of some, but I don't think the East is as bad as people keep wanting to make the East. I said this the other day, and I'm not trying to be harsh, but I think a lot of people that are questioning the East's ability to play basketball are people that heard that last summer and haven't taken the time to watch any of the games this year. They're a better conference than they're getting credit for. So I think what Giannis and the Bucks have done in the East particularly is impressive. So I'm still going Giannis.
I think I said this yesterday as well. If you take LeBron off the Lakers, they're not a playoff team. And I just think that gets overlooked because they have AD, and a lot of AD's success, he's going to get buckets no matter what, but is because of LeBron. But how much of a chance do you think LeBron really has from the voters?
That's always a tricky one because he should have a great chance, right? But then again, there's this constant, we're just so, bored. We get bored with greatness, right? We just love to find a reason to hate on it, and then we just eventually stop talking about it. He should be. I would have no problem with LeBron getting the MVP or Giannis getting the MVP and it being close, or frankly giving it to both of them. I have no problem with that. It should be a slam dunk, but the only problem for voters, and I'm not one, but the only problem for voters is you're going to have to turn around and then justify why this year. Because we constantly hear LeBron could be the MVP every year. So then if that's the case, why this year? That's a tough question for voters to have to answer. So, he should have a shot, but I don't know.
Which is interesting because you mentioned that you didn't think that the Lakers, not you, Fitz, you, Ryan, that the Lakers would not make the playoffs, which brings us to topic 3 with Jason Fitz today. Most underappreciated athlete in sports. Anthony Davis is averaging more points and almost 10 rebounds a night. So LeBron also has that of him playing next to them. So I'm not so sure the Lakers wouldn't make the playoffs if they didn't have LeBron.
Well, and I'll say this about the playoff race. Kyle Kuzma has been particularly disappointing this year, and he's somebody that I really, A, I love watching play, and B, I thought was going to step up and be a star for the Lakers.
Fitz, we had people here that wanted to trade Ben Simmons for Kyle Kuzma. We used to get calls on it all the time.
Oh, well, okay. Well, everybody's lost their mind a little bit. Y'all got to stop drinking so much in the middle of the day.
It was just once. I retracted it the next day.
But the thing with Kuzma is that I think you can look specifically, if there's a question mark for the Lakers, to me, it's that in his new role in this offense, he's not good. He's not good enough at all. And I think he could be a star. So I just have to wonder if he was asked to do a different role, would he be a better player? Because so far, so bad Kuzma compared to what I expected.
So he's the Al Horford of the Lakers.
Yeah. Well said.
It just doesn't fit.
Well said. Yeah, and there isn't an easy solution for it either. I think Kuzma is one of those people that's going to flounder. He's good value right now because of his contract, but he's going to flounder until he can get somewhere and actually get into a system where he can have rhythm, because he has none when he's asked to not handle the ball as much.
Should be fun down the stretch they come in the NBA. We got, by the way, big hockey game in Philly tonight, in Washington tonight. Caps and Flyers. We'll have it for you on 97.3 ESPN, and we will certainly talk more about that tomorrow. But this has been fun talking about some of the worst run organizations. And by the way, you can put Now, the Flyers last year, that story, by the way, the Sixers with the Colangelo stuff, that was, I don't know if that makes you one of the worst run, but stuff like that is stuff that kind of gets you looked at. But the Flyers last year with Hextall and him putting the moles in the locker room to get to get information, that kind of stuff puts you on the list. There's no question about it. That kind of stuff really stands out. When you get a good scandal, that's what you need, a good scandal like that.
No, well, leave it to Spike Lee to create the one for the Knicks. But, I'll take anybody, bugging a locker room or spying on people or private detectives, whatever we can get. I mean, it makes for good drama. It makes for easy radio, that's for sure.
There's no question. Jason Fitz at Jason Fitz. Of course, you can listen to him on ESPN Radio, First Take, Your Take, and every Wednesday with us right here on the Sports Bash. All right, Jay, appreciate it.
Appreciate y'all. Have a great week.
Yeah, man, and we'll talk to him next week. He, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.